Y'all hush now. Hush up and go to sleep. Come on now. You got a long day tomorrow.
It's freezing in here.
I want to go home. I ain't done nothing wrong.
All I done was soap some windows.
I miss my mom.
Shh. Y'all better be quiet or you gonna get the strap.
Man, that lightning gonna bust right on through the roof.
Lord, just let me make it home.
Welcome to part 1 of the Coroner's Report podcast, Locked Doors, Lost Boys. I'm Tracey Carrington. Together, Steve Nawojczyk and I go back into the archives and into the headlines and into the memories of people who lived through this story. We try to give them a voice. At times in this episode, you will hear AI-generated voices reading from historical accounts. These aren't original recordings, but they're recreations meant to bring the words of the past back to life. Their words remain their legacy.
I'm Steve Nawojczyk, and I served as the coroner for 2 of the largest counties in Arkansas and was even appointed the director of the state crime lab. Over the years, I've seen thousands of deaths up close, homicides, suicides, accidents, and natural causes. A coroner's job is to listen to the story a body tells even when no one else is listening. That's what this show is about. And in this episode, Tracey and I are opening the story of the Negro Boys Industrial School at Wrightsville, or NBIS as we'll call it from here on.
It's a tragedy that left 21 young black boys dead, with everyone blamed and nobody held accountable. We'll also hear from modern-day experts who help us understand what really happened that night, including 2 former New York City firefighters, a former juvenile court judge, and a man who grew up in the shadow of the Boys Industrial School. Our first expert is Dr. Brian Mitchell, a history professor from the University of Illinois who spent decades in Arkansas researching race and was familiar with the school.
These industrial homes were started in the 1930s, and they were started as a training ground for boys who were wayward, who they thought could go into lives of crime.
The school was a reformatory. It wasn't built for violent offenders. No, back then, if a kid killed someone, he was usually sent straight to the adult prison.
Wrightsville, Arkansas was different. It was meant for the so-called lesser offenses. There wasn't just one industrial school.
There were 2 campuses, one for white boys, one for black boys. That divide tells you something. Wrightsville wasn't born in a vacuum. It was a product of its time, a product of segregation. The law of the land was separate but equal. In Arkansas, more often than not, that meant separate and unequal.
In 1936, the Works Progress Administration built the brick dormitory and several outbuildings on farmland just south of Little Rock. The WPA had been created during the Great Depression to put people back to work, and many of its projects are still standing today. On paper, the new dormitory was designed to house as many as 60 boys between the ages of 13 and 18. A second nearly identical building followed, intended for the younger kids.
Even in its earliest years, state inspectors raised alarms. One report from 1938 stated that the institution was overcrowded, unsanitary, and without adequate medical care.
Imagine that. A brand new facility that's already being called overcrowded and unsanitary. That same year, a legislative committee stated the dormitory was a fire hazard because the boys were locked in at night without any attendance.
1938, 21 years before the fire, inspectors were saying it in black and white. The dormitory was a fire hazard, with the boys locked inside at night and no one to watch them or alert them to fire. Hell, it was a death trap.
Man, Steve, there's just so much foreshadowing in this story. They should have known. There were signs, there were warnings, and the state didn't act. They didn't fund improvements. They didn't change procedures. They just kept sending boys. And every few years, there was yet another editorial in the paper about the conditions at Wrightsville.
Arkansas must do more than maintain the barest custody of its colored boys. These children need education and training.
Even the newspapers could see it. Custody without care and conditions that would have been unacceptable for white children. Retired Georgia Chief Juvenile Judge Steve Teske believes segregation played a part in this tragedy.
the time in the South, there was a selective decision based on segregation to be harsher with kids of color.
By 1940, reports showed that the white industrial school offered training in carpentry, cabinet work, painting, blacksmithing, a whole array of different things, including shoe repair. It read like a full vocational catalog. Dr. Brian Mitchell told us the contrast with the Wrightsville school couldn't have been sharper.
The white industrial school made mattresses. So the boys learned how to make mattresses. They learned a skill. They completed their educations in a hope that they would go on to lead productive lives.
Marlon Weems grew up in Little Rock during the 1960s and later became a Wall Street trader. Today he's an independent journalist writing about race and politics. Marlon saw the stark differences as well.
One of the weird things was the white equivalent. These kids were getting trained for vocation. So it was truly like a juvenile kind of a facility, but they would come out of it knowing how to do something with a skill. But these kids weren't being trained to do anything but pick cotton.
By contrast, no vocational programs are listed for NBIS. The report does note, however, that NBIS received 156 mattresses produced by the White Boys Trade School.
It didn't take much to see the difference, as Dr. Mitchell points out.
The Black Industrial School was a little bit different. It had an agricultural base, so they would be farming. They grew things like sorghum that were meant to be sold. There was a perception that African Americans were better suited to that type of labor.
In the mid-1940s, NBIS housed 105 boys ranging in age from 8 to 21. Dr. Brian Mitchell says he was shocked.
What I found interesting about it was the number of indefinite sentences, juvenile life sentences, which would have been to their 21st or 18th birthdays, but also the ages at which people are being sent there. There were also accounts of people who were sent to the boys' home because there was no room for them in like foster programs. Imagine how horrendous that would be for a kid that didn't do anything.
Now, according to the superintendent, the commitments range from minor offenses like stealing apples to much more serious crimes. And the boys that were at NBS had the opportunity to learn trades, and they were permitted to sing and dance and play baseball and softball.
Sounds like a sleepaway camp.
Almost too good to be true. Judge Teske is an expert on juvenile justice and has studied the topic for years.
In terms of delinquency prevention, delinquency intervention, you do not send kids with those type of low-level offenses out of home and into a detention facility. That only makes them worse. And in fact, it contributes and it compromises public safety. It's a terrible waste of money for the state to be wasting it on kids who otherwise, if you kept them in the home, done something else with them, the community would have been a lot better off.
That same year, there was an interesting tidbit in the newspaper.
Notice to cotton buyers. The state purchasing agent will sell approximately 30 bales of cotton grown at the Negro Boys Industrial School to the highest bidder at the Jones & Son Cotton Exchange Office.
I'm no farm girl, but each bale weighed about 500 pounds. Do the math. That's 15,000 pounds of cotton, all picked by the boys themselves.
Of course, someone had to pick the cotton, and that work fell to the boys themselves. This raises doubts about the superintendent's rosy picture.
For the children confined there, the reality was far less hopeful. Marlon Weems was surprised when he researched the story.
You're talking about picking cotton. At one point, they literally had like an overseer, an armed guy on a horse, and it just gives you that whole, for all intents and purposes, these guys were treated like they were in a penal colony. That is some hard work. I don't care how old you are. It's one of the most backbreaking of all the things you could do in terms of agriculture. Cotton it's a different level.
In the mid-1940s, a report comes out about improvements made to the White Boys School. New equipment was purchased for vocational training, but what really stood out to me was an entire new water system was added, including 6 fire hydrants and 900 feet of hose. I read that and thought, if only. If only the same had been done at NBIS. By the end of the decade, some legislators began asking some hard questions. One state senator addressed the issue in an editorial.
Arkansas is running a youth penal system. The school has approximately 2,000 acres of good bottomland, and the inmates work in the fields. Do we intend to make it a real industrial school or continue a small prison farm?
The Cummins Prison Farm was no place for kids, but the governor at the time took notice and requested a study.
Our committee just completed a survey on the Negro Boys Industrial School, and there needs to be extensive changes in educational offerings, with the accent on planned vocational training.
The committee noted that while the boys received little to no formal education, it found no evidence of cruelty or abuse directed toward them.
I don't know about you, but I've never met a kid who would be happy about picking 15,000 damn pounds of cotton.
They sure weren't picking that much cotton for funsies.
Let's be honest, those boys weren't learning a trade. They were doing hard labor.
In 1948, the school finally hired its first teacher.
All through the 1940s, that place was turning a profit. The cotton the boys picked made up for the little bit of money the state sent down, and when there was extra, the state just scooped it up and put it back in the general fund.
I guess they're making money off child labor.
That's exactly what it was about.
Dr. Mitchell explains more.
The whole purpose of convict leasing was to create a stream of revenue from the incarceration of people for the state. So it becomes more like adult incarceration.
The committee recommended reducing the size of the farm program and separating it from the school. They also recommended hiring a black superintendent and more black staff members. However, the size of the farm program wasn't reduced until after the fire.
The dormitory buildings were also discussed. The committee reported the buildings were adequate in space and repairs were being made, but there's no information on what repairs were made or what condition the building was really in. It was only 10 years old. Dr. Mitchell explains.
And there were also disparities, not only in what they were doing, but the amount of time and resources that were allotted. The black schools allotted far less resources, so it very quickly started to fall into disrepair. Less personnel were allotted for the black school than the white school. Salaries were smaller, etc., etc.
Foreshadowing what would later unfold, the report noted that employees at the school worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. At night, a single employee was assigned to the older boys' dormitory, serving a 24-hour shift. One boy served as a fire guard and was tasked with staying awake all night and alerting adults in case of trouble.
There were other problems. The boys had no shoes. During one visit by a committee member, a boy had cut his foot and another was bitten by a snake. Shortly afterwards, surplus Army shoes were delivered. The pairs didn't match and the sizes were often wrong, but they were shoes.
The commission reported that few case histories were prepared on the boys. There were no psychiatric or counseling services and not even a recreation program. Their primary activity was picking cotton.
The boys were required to remain at the school for a minimum of 4.5 months before becoming eligible for parole. Some were sentenced to indefinite sentences. In many cases, however, the children who had been paroled were not picked up by their families. As a result, they remained at the institution for years. Overcrowding was routine. Sometimes more than 100 boys were jammed into a space designed for 60. The bunks were so close together they were almost touching.
Governor after governor came along and they all realized the problem. Governor Francis Cherry spoke about it.
The worst thing that can happen to an industrial school is to operate it as a penal institution.
Every few years, MBIS would pop back up in the editorial section of the newspaper.
Farm employment is a good form of rehabilitation, provided it is not carried to extremes. But it's overdone at Wrightsville. A major trouble is that farm work does not allow time for education. Some boys enter the school without knowing how to read and write, and they are still illiterate when discharged.
Again, the public demanded action. This time, a female voice spoke up. Patty Simpson raised her voice and wrote an open letter to the governor.
Governor Cherry, I wonder if you would stop at Wrightsville and investigate the Negro Boys Industrial School situation. The sleeping quarters are like a barn-like WPA structure, with no furnishing other than a hard cot, no books, no games, no pictures, No curtains or flowers can be found here as contrasted with the more homey atmosphere of the white boys' school. It is a shame that there are no better quarters or facilities for these boys to enjoy when they have finished their day's hard work in the fields.
And of course, every time MBIS made the newspaper, heads rolled.
Heads rolled and the governor commissioned a study, but not much ever changed.
Funny how that works. The newspaper reporters give us a very clear picture of what life was like at that school.
Stopped up toilets, dump human waste on the floor in the big boys' dormitory. The water tastes so bad the adult staff personnel refuse to drink it. They haul in water from the outside, but for the boys, there is no alternative. Some of the boys sleep on bed springs without a mattress or pillow.
In Race and Ethnicity in Arkansas, historian Griff Stockley quoted a community activist, Charles Busey, who led a black delegation to inspect Wrightsville in 1953. What they found was horrific. Stored meat eaten by rats, filthy mattresses stacked around the meat, pillows black and greasy. Busey called the building a disgrace to the human eye. The younger boys' dorm was just as bad. He wrote the boys had soiled their beds. And the night before that inspection, there'd been a fire in that dormitory. The superintendent admitted the boys had been locked inside overnight. Busey said their clothes were too dirty for any human to wear. Something had to change.
A new superintendent, Lester Buddy Gaines, was hired to straighten this mess out. First order of business was to fix the backed up sewage, filter the water, and get new bedding for the boys.
Buddy Gaines knew what he was facing. He had been part of the group of black citizens who inspected the facility with Charles Busey just a few months before. He saw just how bad it was.
I want each boy to have a clean nightshirt, which will be changed regularly, along with the bed linens. The boys right now are sleeping in underwear shorts or in the nude. I'm ordering 100 slightly used mattresses. School will open with 5 teachers instructing through the 8th grade.
39 bales of cotton were grown, picked, and sold that same year on the Little Rock Cotton Exchange.
In the years before the fire, there were signs the school was beginning to improve. A swimming pool was built by privately raised funds. One inmate, Arthur Martin, expressed gratitude.
I think the school is a good place for boys who make a mistake. Although all boys don't realize the mistakes they have made and don't know they can still lead a useful life. I haven't been here for 6 days, but so far the school has helped me to realize the value of being honest and that I still have a chance to lead a successful life if I take every opportunity and chance.
James Honorable was another kid at the school who gave a rave review.
The school has done this for me. They give me shoes and clothes. They teach me how to go to school. We have a good teacher to teach us. He has helped me to realize the value of being honest and kind.
Archie Ray Poole would survive the fire. Archie had lived at the school for 3 years, and he also gave a glowing review.
They are teaching me how to go to Sunday school every Sunday. They keep us neat and clean. They are teaching me how to respect grown folks. I learned how to swim last summer.
In fact, according to Dr. Brian Mitchell, at times, parents dropped off their own kids at the school.
I know of at least one case where a kid's parents dropped him off there in a sort of scared straight kind of way, where he's dropped off and spends the night there and they pick him up. Don't ever want to come back here again.
From time to time, a state legislator would float the idea of consolidating the industrial schools, but in the time of segregation, the idea of white kids and black kids commingling, going to the same school, sleeping together, drinking from the same water fountain, that wasn't going to fly.
On the surface, it appears that conditions at the school were improving. However, that really wasn't the case. A young sociology graduate student, Gordon Morgan, visited the campus in 1956.
He would later become the first black professor at the University of Arkansas.
Marlon Weems remembered being shocked to learn that his old sociology professor had written his thesis on the boys' school.
These kids didn't have any proper clothes. They're wearing rags. Most of them had no socks, no underwear, and this is in the wintertime.
Gordon also noted weeks would pass without the boys bathing or even having a change of clothes. There was no laundry facility on site.
This was right before Arkansas made national news with Governor Orville Faubus, who ordered the Arkansas National Guard to block 9 black students from entering Little Rock Central High School. The whole world saw it, soldiers with rifles and bayonets standing in the schoolhouse door. Old Orville was all about Orville.
There's an interesting article in the paper that talks about how Orville tapped into his emergency fund for the school because the money was needed so very badly. The article goes on to state the school had used the sale of agricultural products like cotton to fund their operations, but the state legislature ordered all funds be deposited back into the state treasury. Dr. Mitchell says that's when things got really bad.
That's when you'll begin to see a huge decline in the physical standing of the building, like the maintenance and repairs, because there's no money, quite literally no money to do them.
So not only do we have kids picking cotton to support the school, now we have that money misappropriated back to the state with the governor fully aware. That didn't make the big headlines, but Governor Faubus realized he better get to politicking, and there was no better way to do that than with the press.
Rehabilitation is the objective at the Negro Boys Industrial School in Wrightsville.
Judges were sending kids off to a school without ever having stepped inside. As a former juvenile court judge, Steve Teske told us they should have seen the place with their own eyes.
If I feel I need to commit this kid to the state, then I ought to know and be well versed with how the state is maintaining its correctional facilities.
Teske believes judges have more responsibilities.
If I'm going to send a kid into this program, I better damn well know about the program. Go out there and visit it, because that's on me if I don't, because that's my name on that order. Talk to the people out there. Are these nice people? Do they seem caring toward kids? Are we ensuring that where we're sending them to is really going to help them? That's on us. That's our responsibility. And we can't know that unless we step off the bench, get in our cars, and go out there to verify and confirm. That means that we are doing due process on steroids.
Of course, things were different back then.
You did not have that type of due process for kids yet. That didn't come until the 1960s.
Faubus pushed Superintendent Buddy Gaines into the limelight.
Before a boy leaves the school, he will need 3 things. He needs to know how to do something. He needs personal acceptance, which comes from being able to mix well with others. And he needs a conviction that comes from the Christian religion. We must realize the boy is going to be out of here one of these days. If we haven't taught him to be a better citizen when he goes back into the community than he was before he left, we have accomplished nothing.
You can see from articles in the Arkansas State Press, the black-owned newspaper, the black community was providing for the boys through donations. From books to recreational items to clothing, black women were finding the resources to help those boys.
3 months before the fire, after another dust-up in the newspaper about conditions at the school, Governor Faubus made a visit to Wrightsville.
They really need help. They're using an old stove which should be replaced. The floors have been scrubbed till they're rotten in the dormitories, kitchen, and dining room. Side of the school's worst building I've ever seen anywhere.
The school was located in the big boys' dormitory. The kitchen and dining hall were in another building.
The dormitory was constructed in a U shape.
Entering through the front doors, you stepped into a space used for classrooms and a small chapel. Extending back from that front section, there were 2 long wings. To the right, a sewing room and wood shop. To the left, a large restroom and the dormitory itself. In the open center of the U, formed by the building, administrators added a small caretaker's office.
The dormitory wing was divided into 2 sections, a large bathroom and the sleeping quarters.
Access began at a doorway that connected the classroom and the chapel space to a long corridor. Just inside that entrance, a door on the right opened toward the courtyard, but it was always locked and never used. The boys only had one way in or out of the dormitory section, through the hallway that led back to the classroom and chapel area. That corridor passed the bathroom before continuing straight into the sleeping quarters. Inside the dormitory were rows and rows of wooden World War II surplus bunk beds. The room was built to hold 60 boys, ages 13 to 18. On this night, 69 were asleep inside. The space measured roughly 54 by 30 feet. Just over 1,600 square feet, with 18 windows in total, 9 lining each side. The total square footage of the building was 8,800 square feet, so the dormitory was just a small section, but the entire building was lost in that fire.
The regular caretaker, Mr. Banks, was absent. He had been hospitalized for several weeks before the fire. In his place, responsibilities were divided between Wilson Hall and Lee Austin. That night, according to 15-year-old Otis Sidney, it was Lee Austin who locked the boys inside. Afterward, Austin returned to his own house on the campus about 150 yards away. 2 trustees were sleeping in the classroom area, but they had not been entrusted with a key. Imagine a single crowded room crammed wall to wall with bunks stacked close together, and then in the middle of the night, smoke began to creep under the door and down the long hallway into the room where nearly 70 boys lay sleeping. Everything that could go wrong was already in place. Inspectors had sounded the alarm, journalists had written editorials, families had begged for improvements. Even the superintendent admitted most of the children were in for petty offenses or because there was nowhere else to put them. All it needed was a spark.
And that spark would come in the early morning hours of March 5th, 1959.
The night before, a severe thunderstorm had rumbled through central Arkansas. Lightning lit up the skies and thunder rattled the windows. Those kinds of storms aren't uncommon for Arkansas.
Inside, 69 boys lay down on narrow bunks trying to sleep.
21 of them would never make it out.
This concludes part 1 of this episode of Locked Doors, Lost Boys on the Coroner's Report podcast. If you like our content, please remember to like and subscribe. If you have questions or comments, please reach out to us on our website at thecoronersreport.net or on any social media platform at The Coroner's Report Podcast. Thanks goes out to our voice actors J.D. West, Alan Prather, and Savvy Valentine. Special thanks to Keith Holtz, Judge Steve Teske, Marlon Weems, Dr. Brian Mitchell, Jim Hawley, and Guy Lancaster. This episode would not have been possible without the decades of research conducted by Griff Stockley for his book Black Boys Burning, the 1959 fire at the Arkansas Negro Boys Industrial School, published by the University Press of Mississippi. We also acknowledge the companion volume, Blood in Their Eyes, the Elaine Massacre of 1919 by Griff Stockley, Dr. Brian Mitchell, and Guy Lancaster, published by the University of Arkansas Press. For additional context on race and history in the state, we recommend Race and Ethnicity in Arkansas, New Perspectives, also from the University of Arkansas Press. We want to thank Encyclopedia Arkansas, the Journeyman newsletter on Substack, the Butler Center for Arkansas Studies, the Bobby L. Roberts Library of Arkansas History and Art, the Central Arkansas Library System, and the University of Arkansas Little Rock Center for Arkansas History and Culture. And with any research project, we would be lost without the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and AY Magazine. Copyright 2025 Ossey Grove Media, LLC.